Okay, this is my all-time favourite cricketing 11, and I've been bugged by a good friend of mine, my mate Shane, to do this. He's been bugging me for months, and finally we came up with a list of 11 players with about 9 others that could have made the side, and I'm really at a wit's end. But these are my favourite 11 players, who are ex-players, and they may not be the best players, but they're my favourites, and I will tell you why. We're going to start with the opening pair of batsmen. We're going to start with Brian Lara. You cannot argue against Brian Lara being anyone's fantasy team. If you're arguing against Brian Lara in a fantasy team, you're nuts. I understand why people go with Sachin Tendulkar. Maybe, I don't know, someone like being both a key player for a test side for a decade. But I will go with Brian Lara. He could single-handedly win a test match on his own, and he also is the record holder for the most runs in a test match. So Brendan McCullum, players like that of equal standing in their test sides. Brian Lara for me is the man. He scored 400 odd against England in the West Indies about 15 years ago, towards the end of his Test career, and won a Test match by himself, pretty much. But I would open the batting with him, alongside South Africa's and probably the world's greatest all-rounder, Jacques Kallis. Personally, I do think he should have got possibly more wickets, but he's still got 308 odd wickets Test level, even more at first class and T20 in one days. But Jacques Kallis. You cannot argue against Jacques Kallis and Brian Lara opening the batting. That's a terrifying opening partnership when they're at their peak, at their prime. And Jacques Kallis has got over 11,000 runs, so it's just a no-brainer for me. And people are saying, why not select Tendulkar? You'll see why when I get further into the lineup, why I've gone for more explosive, quicker scoring Test players, who have also played a lot of T20. Now, Brian Lara, obviously the West Indies really dominated one-day internationals in the 80s and 70s and 80s, and of course in the early 90s as well. They were the one-day kings, one of the best test sides in the world until, I would say, about 15 years ago when Brian Lara retired. But Chanderpaul and Sarwan do not get on this list. That says something about how good I think Brian Lara actually was in his prime. But I would have wicketkeeper in at number 3, Adam Gilchrist. He would be my wicketkeeper. Even though there's another wicketkeeper on the list who also plays in the outfield, Adam Gilchrist is a pure wicketkeeper. Possibly should have got more test runs, but he normally batted at like 4, 5, 6, sometimes 7 in the Australian lineup when he was playing, because there were so many good upper and middle order batsmen ahead of him that he normally batted lower down. But as a batsman, underrated. His career went on to his early 40s with the IPL, where he finally retired a couple of years ago. Outstanding player, great leader, great gentleman as well, great ambassador for the sport. I would have him in this side more for his wicket-keeping ability and his calming influence when there's an awkward situation where either the bowling is being expensive, they're not getting players out. He's there, he's calming, he's talking to his fielders around him, and a bit of captaincy as well. Definitely on my list. There are other wicketkeepers out there, such as, I don't know, we could argue about multiples. Alex Stewart, for example. There you go, there's one. Doesn't make the list. Only one Englishman makes this list, and you'll be very surprised who it is. Number 4 is the other wicketkeeper, but also great as a batsman, great as a slip fielder, because he can play anywhere, and he can even bowl a bit of spin, is AB de Villiers. He's an innovator. Without this guy, T20 might have been a lesser form of the game and may not have succeeded. This guy innovates. He's the reverse paddle shot, the overhead sweep, some of the shots he pulls off. I don't even know how he does them. He's obviously retired this year. He cites that he's mentally and physically shattered after 14 years solid international test, one day and T20 cricket at both domestic level and international level. And you can't blame him. He's been a machine for South Africa for better part of a decade and a half. He's lit up the IPL for the better part of a decade. I think it's right and fair that he's allowed to retire. Even though he's only 34, I think he's done his dues. And you cannot look at that opening 4. I mean, that's like nearly 1,000 runs if they're all on form. It's insane. Number 5 is more of a fielding option, but he can bat, and another South African. And people are going to go, who? A lot of people, younger fans, may not know who Jonty Rhodes is. Possibly one of the best fielders of the last generation. Retired when I was a lot younger, but post-apartheid South Africa, Jonty Rhodes, one of the best fielders you ever see. Just type in his name on YouTube and you'll see some insane fielding from this man. absolutely brilliant fielder. Revolutionised how fielding is coached, and how more athletic players are now than they were 20 years ago. Revolutionary player, much like AB de Villiers. Absolutely revolutionary in the fitness levels. He's now a coach in the IPL. He spent a lot of time in India. He's improved the subcontinental fielding levels in Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, and Sri Lanka with his work in the IPL and other T20 competitions. But my God, that guy, he could pull off some catches that you wouldn't believe. With great timing with his hands. Also a pretty decent batsman as well. But obviously, because of apartheid, a lot of South Africans of his generation didn't get much of a chance to play Test cricket of post-apartheid because they were that much older. So his Test career is a lot shorter than some of the others on this list, and therefore his Test run rate isn't as high, he hasn't got as many runs, but his fielding, Jesus Christ, he made up with his fielding. He can win you Test matches in the field. Also, great calming influence when a bowler's having a bad spell and there's a lot of boundaries going or a lot of runs that are unnecessary. When fielders are dropping catches, he's not one to shout and scream necessarily. He's one to talk, communicate. And he did have his moments, but he was a very, very level-headed player. Brilliant. I would definitely have him in my side. Now we're getting into the all-rounders proper. Now we've got Jack Kallis up here, but now this is just the next lot are all fast seam bowlers. There are no spinners in my fantasy 11, and some people may go, why? Well, if this was to be like today, spin now, there are very few world-class spinners about. And if a spinner has an off day, he's going for 6, 3-4 times and over because the way batting is in players will just knock you out of the ground. It's not just maybe the videos will just knock you all over the park for 30 runs and over, and it's embarrassing, and you don't want that. But the first Test player I saw take a Test wicket, Wasim Akram. By the time I started watching cricket in 93, 94, Wasim Akram's career was coming to its end. His best spells were probably just before I was born or just when I was a toddler. But Wasim Akram, as part of your bowling attack, that is terrifying. He can bowl high 90s on his day. When he was on form, he could bowl about, 96 miles an hour. That's 30 miles an hour, 36 miles an hour above the national speed limit in the UK, and that's 26 miles an hour above the motorway speed limit in the UK. He can bowl that. Imagine trying to face that as an opener or as a tail ender. It doesn't matter what level of batsman you are and how good you are or how bad you are. He will probably take your head off with a bouncer or bamboozle you with some in-swing. Wasim Akram, one of the fastest bowlers of all time. No shadow of a doubt. You could not deny how fast this guy was. But here's another guy on my list coming up. Now, it was a toss-up between the pair of them, Ambrose or Walsh, and I've gone with Courtney Walsh. It was a toss-up, which one I went through. He has a bit more batting ability, much like Wasim Akram. He can get runs. One of the West Indies' finest ever bowlers for the better part of a decade and a half. Retired, I would say, I think 15 years ago, 20 years ago, something like that, pushing it. I remember watching his last Test series in England, which had one of the lowest scoring Test totals ever from the West Indies, and one of the other ones by England with like 50 odd all out. Courtney Walsh, one of the best fast bowlers that the West Indies has ever produced, and the world. Notice sort of single Englishman yet. We haven't got to the English player that I'm choosing. He's a very underrated player in my eyes. I've done a video on him. Yeah. Courtney Walsh, you could not argue his skill level with a new ball or with a ball that's 30 overs old. Quite literally. Quick, bounce it. And if you have a bowler of a similar pace at the other end, a good partnership, like such as Ambrose, Curtly Ambrose, you're going to cause absolute chaos in the middle order, for example, or tail. You could wipe a tail out in 5 overs. You could quite literally decimate. And you remember, he's playing alongside Brian Lara. This is not about West Indian side that he played in. It was actually a world-class West Indian side 15, 20 years ago. That was at the end of his career. He really was playing alongside star players. Right, now we're getting into the really, really difficult ones because the next 4 bowlers, they could all bat at 11 or 8. They can all bat a little bit. They all can field, and they're all bloody quick. And the next one up, my favourite bowler of all time, just for the fact that he just had that edge about him. And he's probably the fastest bowler of all time, Brett Lee. He's bowled more balls over 90 miles an hour than anyone else, average. And And I remember his innings at Trent Bridge 2005, where they came a run short from drawing the test and 2 runs short of winning the test against England, when he's on his haunches and Freddie Flintoff goes up to a crying Brett Lee and shakes his hand and goes, "Don't worry, mate, there's always next time." He decided to attack the England seam attack that day in the second innings. The Australian upper order had collapsed somewhat. He was lower middle order, long tail, and him and Kasparovich at the end trying to salvage the test match. They were 2 runs away from winning last ball, and Kasparovich goes for a hook shot and gets caught. But Brett Lee that day showed defiance. But in that entire test series, he was going hell for leather, bowling average about, I would say, 93 to 95 mile an hour in English conditions, which tend to be a little bit slower. He was really going for it, full zip. At one point, he held the record for the fastest ball ever bowled. That has since been broken, but he really did hold it in Test cricket. Well, I think it was about 98, 99 mile an hour. He really went hell for leather. Yes, he's now retired. He's retired a couple of years ago. Again, no Englishman so far. We have West Indies, South Africa, Australia, South Africa, Pakistan, the only Pakistani in the team, West Indies, Australia. No Indians. It was a toss-up between one Indian fast bowler, but since he's in prison, so Sreesanth's off the list, because you want to have that X-factor unpredictability. Yeah, Sreesanth would have made it had he not decided to be a match-fixing cheat. So there's that. But Brett Lee. Now, here comes my English selection. And people may go, why him? Because injury did curtail a lot of his career, and he missed a lot of time from the Test because of a hip injury. But when he did play for England, his numbers are, for his brief, I think it's about 37 tests I think he played for England in total. Ryan Sidebottom, his brief spell as one of England's best strike bowlers are actually better numbers than Jimmy Anderson. He's got a hat-trick to his name, hat-trick ball. He's the 37th player under England colours to get a hat-trick. He's got a couple of 5-wicket hauls as well. Ryan Sidebottom, very underrated. Ended up captaining Yorkshire. He played for Nottinghamshire and Yorkshire in his county cricket career. Never decided to go over to the IPL just to finish out his career like a lot of bowlers have, a lot of players have from Pakistan and Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. Decided to keep going in county cricket. Ended up being captain of Yorkshire, so that's a fair achievement. Brilliant player. Very underrated. Injury did curtail his career. He's probably the most injured player on this list. Other players battle through injuries. I think there's one more player at the end who's maybe had also serious injuries that's also cut short his career. Ryan Sidebottom, though, kept him playing till last year, till I think he was 39. So he had a long, lengthy career. Should have possibly got more Test matches, but because he had a hip injury in his 20s, he wasn't selected for a better part of a decade. When he came back into the Test side, he was more mature. He had to, train the injury out. He had lost a little bit of pace. He was still bowling about 85 to 90 mile an hour on a good day. 85 about average for Ryan Sidebottom. And to be fair, in English conditions, if he was playing against India in the second Test, the result would have been exactly the same. He would have had exactly the same movement as Jimmy Anderson. But he's one of my favourite England players. Very underrated, and his nickname is Sexual Chocolate, so you just got to find that slightly interesting. Now, the last two is a South African and an Aussie, and it's not McGrath, it's the Aussie. It's his bowling partner, Jason Gillespie. I can't probably misspell his name, but Jason Gillespie. I've misspelled his name, I know that much because I can't spell to save my life. But Jason Gillespie, the first night watchman to get a double century. I think he's the only night watchman to get a double century. He was meant bat at 11 against Bangladesh 2005. He was put in as night watchman, and he goes on to get double century and be top scoring in the Test series against Bangladesh for Australia. Very useful secondary bowler after you got McGrath and your Brett Lees. Very useful seamer secondary. So your Brett Lee or your Ryan Sidebottom, for example, your Courtney Walsh or your Wes McConnell over the bowling. Good backup. Good second, third seam attack choice. Finally, possibly my second favourite player after Brett Lee. And this is so hard to say Brett Lee's a bit better than him. But for a brief period, Dale Steyn was the best bowler in the world. He was better than Jimmy Anderson. He was better than the Morkel brothers. He was better than any other bowlers on this list for his numbers. Dale Steyn. yeah, shoulder injury did him. Hip injury, shoulder injury, niggling injuries and age, mental and physical exhaustion. You got to look at some of these. Brian Lara didn't really have many. Jack Callis didn't really have many. I think finally age caught up with them a little bit. Gilchrist played till he was 40 odd. De Villiers played till he was 34. Johnny Rides, obviously apartheid curtailed his test career, but he's still as athletic in the field now in training sessions in his 50s that he was in his 30s 20 years ago. Akram, age caught up with him. Again, little niggly injuries, nothing major. Courtney Walsh, age, played till his late 30s. Brett Lee played till he was 37. Sidebottom played till he was 40, 39. Jason Gillespie, again, top retired, I think, in the last decade. He's now a coach, he's a very good coach in the county championship. Dale Steyn, shouldering. Dale Steyn, Ryan Sidebottom are probably the two most injured players on this list. But let's have a look at the bowlers. Callis, Akram, Walsh, Lee, Sidebottom, Gillespie, Steyn. Jack Callis is probably the slowest out of the lot, averaging about 83 miles an hour. That is a terrifying bowling lineup. You don't need to spin in that lineup. You've got two full out all-rounders, and I'd say Brett Lee could probably bat the best out of the bowling tail. And Gillespie's got a double century to his name at test level. I know it was against Bangladesh, and Bangladesh at the time were the worst test side out there, but up to number 10, they can bat. Dale Steyn can do a little bit of batting, get 5-10 runs at the tail. He's your death bowler. He's the guy you want in a pressure situation when you've got, like, I don't know, 5 overs left of the day, and you need to get that wicket, put the night watchman in. He's the guy to take out a key wicket. But look at that. 400 odd top score. 11,000 plus, I think 13,000 plus test runs. Just solid wicketkeeping. He caught, I think, the most catches of a wicketkeeper ever. He can just win a test match like that in a session. He can field all day. And then they can skittle out a world-class team in about 40 overs. Yeah, but these are my favourite players. I love watching fast bowlers go at full chat. I don't know what it is. I just like watching stumps fly out the ground 20 foot behind them. And I've had the great joy when cricket was free to air in this country, watching all these guys play test matches. Yeah, and World Cups. And unfortunately, at the moment in the UK, we have to pay a stupid amount of subscription to Sky to see weaker teams play than they used to, because cricket isn't as good. I think, yeah, the level of cricket at the moment is not as good as what these guys were producing in the last 20, 30 years. But there you go, that's my favourite, my all-time cricket 11. This is the longest video I've done in a while. There you go, there's my favourite cricket 11. Place your favourite 11 of players you have seen in the comment section below. And you can disagree as much as you want, because there's no spin on here, there's no Shane Warne, there's no Muralitharan, there's no Tendulkar, there's no Kumble. I missed out Anil Kumble, for Christ's sake, and some other great Indian players. And I've seen a lot of Indian players play. But this is my favourite lineup. And I've argued long and hard. There are other players like Sarwan, Chandapal, Anil Kumble, VVS Laxman, who would make my second 11. But this is my favourite first 11. The reserve team is just as star-studded, but these are my favourite players. Thank you very much for watching. Long in the making. Took a fair bit of working out which order to put the bowling lineup in and the batting lineup. It's a very bowling-heavy lineup, I will admit. There is not much. It's a very, very long tail and a very short upper order, but even Wasim Akram can get 50s there. So the top 6 can bat. Brett Lee can bat. I know Sidebottom can bat a bit. Jason Gillespie's got a double century. So there's batting depth to this lineup. But anyway, thank you very much for watching and sticking to the end of the video. And there'll be some more videos for you soon. We've got the third test, India and England, coming up. Will Ben Stokes play? Obviously, that's a key talking point. We'll discuss that later in the week. Obviously, it's Premier League season started now, so we can talk about some of the Premier League stories that go along with Rizal, things like that. I shall see you soon.